Welcome to Life Stories. Today, we bring you the powerful journey of a woman who fought for her identity, her love, and her family. This is the story of Mia, a successful surgeon who thought she had everything, until she stepped into a world that didn't accept her. Battling against the cold indifference of her husband's wealthy family, Mia faces a life-altering decision that will change everything. It's a tale of resilience, courage, and the profound lessons that life teaches us. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to begin today's story. I have always believed in hard work, perseverance, and the kind of independence that can only come from years of sacrifice. Growing up, I watched my parents work tirelessly, struggling to make ends meet. They taught me to value resilience and to always push forward, no matter the obstacles in my way. It was these lessons that shaped me into the woman I became. The woman who dedicated her 20s to medical school, who endured sleepless nights studying and working exhausting shifts, knowing that every moment of hardship was one step closer to the life I dreamed of. By the time I entered my 30s, I had everything I ever wanted. I was a respected cardiothoracic surgeon in New York, known for my expertise, my dedication, and my ability to perform under pressure. I had a successful career, the admiration of my colleagues, and the satisfaction that comes with building a life through sheer will. But despite all of this, there was something missing: love. I had been too focused on my career to notice, too absorbed in achieving my goals to realize that a part of me was longing for something more. That was until I met him, Adam Harris. Adam entered my life as if he were a storm. Powerful, unexpected, and captivating. He was everything I thought I had no time for: charming, sophisticated, and brimming with confidence. The kind of man who had been raised with wealth. The kind of man who could charm an entire room with just a smile. Our first meeting took place at a gala, a prestigious event organized by the hospital's board of directors. I had initially thought he was just another socialite, someone whose world was as far removed from mine as could be. But as we began talking, I realized I was wrong. Adam was different. He wasn't just rich, he was intelligent, well-spoken, and most importantly, he seemed genuinely interested in me. We spoke for hours, delving into subjects that mattered to both of us, exchanging ideas and philosophies. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like an outsider. I didn't feel like someone who had to work extra hard to prove her worth. With Adam, I was just me. Our relationship moved quickly, almost dizzyingly so. We had lavish dates, weekend getaways to private estates, whispered promises in the quiet of the night. He made me feel special, valued, and wanted. For once, I felt like I was enough. Even though I knew deep down that I came from a completely different world, one of hard work and sacrifice. One that was far from the privilege Adam had grown up in. He never made me feel inferior. He made it clear that none of that mattered to him. He loved me for who I was. And so, when he proposed, I was caught off guard. It was a weekend in the Hamptons. A quiet, private estate overlooking the sea. The evening was perfect, the moonlight glistening on the water, the soft breeze, the dinner under the stars. Adam, dressed in a sharp tuxedo, got down on one knee, holding out a glittering diamond ring. For a moment, I hesitated. It wasn't because I didn't love him, I did, but because I knew what marrying him would mean. It would mean entering a world that wasn't mine. A world where I would never quite belong. Adam came from a powerful Southern family, one whose wealth had been built on generations of cotton plantations and business acumen. The Harris family was old money, the kind that still clung to its traditions, its notions of who was worthy to be part of their world. I had never met them in person, but I had heard enough to know that I wasn't the kind of woman they had envisioned for their son. I wasn't from their world. I hadn't grown up in a mansion or attended Ivy League schools. I wasn't even white, a fact I knew would not sit well with a family so deeply rooted in Southern aristocracy. But Adam assured me that none of that mattered. He loved me, and that was all that counted. And in that moment, his words washed over me like a bomb. I said yes. The wedding itself was small, almost shockingly so for a family as wealthy as the Harrises. There were no grand ballrooms, no extensive guest lists filled with high society names. Instead, The ceremony was a quiet affair at a private estate in Charleston, attended only by close friends and family. At first, I thought this might have been a gesture of compromise, a way to make things easier for both of us, a way for Adam to ease me into his world. It wasn't until the ceremony was over that I realized the truth. The Harris family didn't want a grand wedding because they didn't want to celebrate our union at all. Adam's mother, Eleanor, barely spoke to me beyond the necessary pleasantries. His father, Richard, shook my hand stiffly, offering nothing more than a murmured congratulations. And the guests, they weren't even subtle about it. I saw the sidelong glances, the whispers behind raised champagne glasses. They knew I didn't belong, even as I stood at the altar exchanging vows with the man I loved. I felt the weight of that truth settle deep in my chest. The reality of what I had married into was only beginning to unfold. The wedding day, despite its simplicity, had been a blur. I was still riding the high of saying yes to Adam, still intoxicated by the whirlwind romance we had shared. But reality set in the moment we returned to the Harris family estate. A sprawling southern mansion that had stood for nearly 2 centuries. It was a place steeped in history, where every corner exuded wealth, privilege, and tradition. As we stepped through the grand double doors, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just walked into a world that wasn't meant for me. The house was beautiful, but in an oppressive way. Its opulence was suffocating, the walls lined with portraits of ancestors, all of them white, all of them staring down at me as if they knew I didn't belong. And from that moment on, I understood one thing clearly. I hadn't just married Adam, I had married his family. And his family didn't want me. Eleanor, Adam's mother, made it painfully clear from the start. Her cold indifference was subtle but unmistakable. She ignored my opinions on household matters, subtly excluding me from family conversations, making decisions without consulting me, and leaving me completely out of the family business. Richard, Adam's father, was even worse. He had no interest in pretending to be polite. He spoke about me as if I were a temporary inconvenience, someone who would eventually fade away. Despite Adam's assurances that things would get better, that his family just needed time, nothing changed. It wasn't just the blatant disregard for me as a person. It was the constant reminder that I was different, that I was not one of them. At first, I tried to convince myself that it would be fine. I told myself that marriage, especially to a man like Adam, would require adjustments. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe I just needed to let things settle. But deep down, I knew I was fooling myself. The truth was undeniable. They didn't want me here. The hardest part, however, was watching Adam remain indifferent. I kept telling myself that he loved me, that he had chosen me despite knowing how his family would react, that it would be enough. But love, I was beginning to understand, was not the same as loyalty. Adam loved me in the quiet moments, in the privacy of our bedroom, in the gentle kisses he gave me before leaving for work. But when it came to confronting his family, he did nothing. I was left to navigate the coldness of his world alone. And it was becoming more than I could bear. I tried to fill the void. I threw myself into my work, returning to the hospital, pouring all my energy into my patients, my career. But even that couldn't shield me from the sense of isolation that consumed me whenever I walked through the doors of the Harris estate. I was no longer Mia, the brilliant surgeon from New York. I was simply Adam's wife, a title that held no real meaning. I had no voice, no authority, no standing. I was just a decorative figure, someone to be seen but never truly heard. One of the few places where I could escape, even if just for a moment, was the garden. The lush, perfectly manicured grounds behind the estate became my refuge, a place where I could walk for hours, surrounded by the scent of blooming flowers and the tranquility of nature. It was the one place where I didn't have to feel like an outsider. But even there, the sense of isolation was always looming. As the days went by, I found myself slipping further into despair. I was losing the person I had once been. I had always believed that marriage was about partnership, about building a life together, supporting each other. But within the walls of this house, I felt more like a prisoner. And when I found out I was pregnant, I hoped, naively, that perhaps this would bring Adam and his family closer to me. I thought that a child might bridge the gap. That Adam's family would finally accept me. But I was wrong. The moment I told Adam, I saw his face light up with excitement. But when I told Eleanor, her response was cold, detached, like she was giving me the bare minimum of congratulations before turning her attention elsewhere. I couldn't help but wonder if this was a sign of things to come. I had married Adam, but I was quickly realizing that I had also married his family. And they weren't interested in embracing me, at least, not on my terms. The birth of our daughter, Emma, should have been a joyous occasion, a fresh beginning for our family. Instead, it only served to highlight the divide between me and the Bradshaws. In the days leading up to Emma's arrival, I had tried to convince myself that things might change. A baby, I thought, would be the perfect bridge between me and Adam's family. Eleanor and Richard would have to warm up to me eventually. Wouldn't they? A grandchild might shift their perception. But that hope quickly evaporated as soon as Emma was born. I was exhausted from labor. The physical toll it took on me was immense. But I was overjoyed at the sight of my little girl. Holding her for the first time, I thought that perhaps this tiny life, this symbol of our love, would unite us, would make everything worth it. I thought maybe the Bradshaws would finally see me for who I truly was. Just a woman. A mother. Someone capable of caring for their son's child. But no. The moment Eleanor entered the room, her eyes were cold, her words polite but distant. She didn't even offer me a congratulations. She merely acknowledged Emma's birth with a quiet nod and left the room without a second glance. I felt a sting in my chest. This wasn't what I had imagined. In my mind, a grandmother would have been overjoyed, eager to shower love and attention on her grandchild. But Eleanor wasn't like that. She was the same as she had always been, distant, cold, and above all, in control. Adam was thrilled, of course. He kissed me with excitement, whispered about the future we would build. But the joy I felt was overshadowed by the presence of Eleanor in the background, silently asserting her authority over my daughter. When she took Emma from my arms to help with the baby, it felt like more than just assistance. It felt like an ownership of my child, like she was laying claim to the little girl I had carried for 9 months. At first, I told myself that Eleanor was just excited to be a grandmother, that I should appreciate the help. After all, I was tired, recovering from childbirth, and adjusting to the demands of a newborn. But as days turned into weeks, it became clear that Eleanor had no intention of giving me the space to be Emma's mother. She made decisions about Emma's care without consulting me, picked out her clothes without asking my opinion, and even rearranged Emma's nursery without my permission. Every small action, every quiet decision made behind my back, chipped away at the sense of control I once had over my life. I was no longer just a woman, now. I was a mother. But in this house, I wasn't even allowed to fully embrace that role. The room that had once been mine, the one place I could go to find solace, was slowly being replaced with Eleanor's vision for what she wanted Emma's life to be. And with every passing day, the distance between Adam and me grew. I tried to talk to Adam about it, but he would dismiss it. "She's just trying to help," he would say, as if that somehow made it all right. But it wasn't help, it was control. And what hurt the most was that Adam couldn't, or wouldn't, see it. He continued to bury his head in his work, traveling more often than not, leaving me alone with his family and their expectations. I was left in a house full of people who neither understood nor respected me. Feeling more and more like a stranger in my own life, I began to resent the life I had built with Adam. I had worked so hard to get where I was, to carve out a space for myself in the world. But here, in this house, it felt like none of that mattered. The woman I had been before Emma was born, strong, independent, confident, was slowly slipping away. The weight of it all began to crush me, and I knew I had to make a change. But I didn't know how. It wasn't just the Bradshaws I was fighting anymore, it was my own sense of self. My love for Adam had once been enough to keep me going. But love without respect, without loyalty, had begun to feel empty. I had to find a way out. And soon, the answer began to take shape in my mind. If I couldn't change things with Adam's family, then maybe it was time to change things for myself. For Emma, I couldn't let this continue. I couldn't let them erase me. But the path ahead would not be easy. I would need to be strategic. I would need to fight for Emma, and for myself. And in that fight, I would need to learn to stand tall. Even if it meant standing alone. It was after one particular family dinner that everything shifted for me. I had been attempting to keep a calm facade. To swallow my growing frustration. To endure the quiet dismissals and subtle insults. But that night, something in me snapped. The dinner was typical for the Bradshaw family, opulent. Extravagant. The kind of event that made me feel small and invisible. The guests were all important people, politicians, business moguls, landowners, all speaking in hushed tones of legacy and family values. As if those things alone could define a person's worth. I had long learned to keep my thoughts to myself. But this night, I couldn't help but feel suffocated by the silence that hung in the air whenever I spoke. The words felt so rehearsed, so polite, and yet so hollow. I was standing beside Adam. As expected, smiling at guests, shaking hands with people who barely acknowledged my presence beyond my marriage to him. I had become a figurehead in their world, a wife to a successful man. But nothing more. I had spent years in New York building my career, my reputation, and yet here, in this room, I was nobody. I was just Adam's wife. An accessory to his life. It felt like a weight pressing down on me, reminding me with every glance that I didn't belong. The evening dragged on, with conversations about family traditions and business strategies. They didn't even bother to ask about me. To make small talk. It was as if I wasn't there. As if my presence was nothing more than a piece of furniture. To be glanced at occasionally but never really acknowledged. That was when it happened. Adam's sister, Caroline, who had never hidden her disdain for me, raised her glass in the midst of one of these discussions. She made a show of toasting. Her words laced with something I couldn't quite place. Then, with a smirk on her face, she tipped her glass forward, spilling red wine all over my dress. The room fell silent for a moment. Then the laughter began. It started with polite chuckles, but soon grew into a ripple of amusement that I could hear from every corner of the room. Caroline's eyes gleamed with satisfaction as she apologized, her voice dripping with mock sincerity. "How clumsy of me," she said, feigning surprise, as if she hadn't done it on purpose. The laughter echoed in my ears, sharp and cruel. I felt the color drain from my face, the heat of humiliation rising in my chest. Adam stood there, sighing, shaking his head as if I were the one to blame. He didn't even offer me a napkin, didn't attempt to console me. His indifference was more painful than the laughter itself. It was as if he were ashamed of me, as if I were the one causing a scene. I felt a knot tighten in my throat, but I refused to let them see me break. I pushed back my chair, stood up slowly, and walked out of the room, every eye in the place following me. I didn't care. I couldn't stay there any longer. The humiliation, the isolation, the constant reminder that I wasn't truly part of their world. It was all too much. I didn't stop until I reached my room. As soon as I closed the door behind me, I collapsed against it, my heart pounding in my chest. I had endured so much over the past year. So much silence, so much rejection. But that night, something in me had shattered. I was done. I couldn't keep pretending that I belonged in a family that didn't want me. I couldn't keep swallowing my pride for the sake of maintaining some semblance of peace. As I stood there, my mind raced. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't stay. I wouldn't stay. I wasn't just going to let this continue, this life, this marriage, this constant sense of being less than. I had built my career from nothing. I had fought for everything I had ever wanted. And I was done letting anyone, especially Adam's family, make me feel like I wasn't worthy of the life I had created. I grabbed my purse, my hands shaking as I pulled out the bank statements, the legal papers, the documents I had secretly collected over the past few months. They were my insurance, my way out. I had planned for this moment, knowing it might come one day. I had hoped it wouldn't. But now that it had arrived, I wasn't going to waste another second. I packed a small suitcase, just the essentials for Emma and me. I didn't look back. I wouldn't let them have any more control over my life. My daughter's life. I had made the decision. And I was going to follow through. The Bradshaws may have tried to erase me. But I wasn't going to let them. I was leaving, and I would make sure they never had the power to do this to me again. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt in months. The decision to leave wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Adam's family had made it clear that they would never accept me. And I had come to realize that love alone wasn't enough to sustain a marriage, especially when it came with so much rejection and disdain. With Emma in my arms, I stepped out of the room and into the unknown, my heart pounding with both fear and determination. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew that I was done living in the shadow of a family that didn't respect me. As I drove away from the mansion, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. For the first time in a long time, I was finally free to be myself, to raise my daughter in a world where I wouldn't be treated as an outsider. As the days passed, I fought for what was rightfully mine. I didn't back down. I found a lawyer who was willing to help me, who believed in my fight for justice. The legal battle wasn't easy, but I was stronger than I had ever been. In the end, I won full custody of Emma. It was a victory not just for me, but for every woman who had ever felt invisible, unheard, or unworthy. I proved that no one has the right to take away your dignity or your voice. Thank you for following my journey. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay tuned for more life stories that inspire, empower, and remind us all that we have the strength to rewrite our own narratives. The story of my life is just beginning, and I can't wait to see where it leads.